Oh my gosh, it's another camera. This is the Canon PowerShot SX230HS. Surprisingly, not the most complicated or confusing name of even any of these cameras. And let me just say, this camera is super nice. This is definitely a point-and-shoot camera, but it has a manual aperture, shutter, and it also has auto and a bunch of other modes for specific shooting conditions, which is so much better than this camera, which was previously my favorite camera, and is yet to get its own video, so maybe when I do a video on this, I'll also do a video comparing them. So this camera is a 21 megapixel camera from 2011. That is 13 years ago, my goodness. But anywho, even though it has fewer megapixels, it has a longer zoom. This one has a 12x zoom, and this one has a 14x zoom. Now, I forgot what the crop factor of either of these cameras is, so I don't know how that actually translates to focal length, but it's branded as being more zoom, I guess. So this camera has a control wheel, and that is the only dial on this camera, but it also has a D-pad under that control wheel. Obviously it's got a pop-up flash, it's got all this stuff, and it has a GPS, which I'm definitely not turning on. The video modes. So even though this is a camera from 2011, this in fact shoots 1080 video, or all the way down to 320 video, or I guess 240 video. But the real kicker of this camera for me was I got this for $5, and it shoots super slow motion 240 frames per second. That is 10 times slower than real time, which is exactly the same as your iPhone. So what's the trade-off? Well, the recording resolution for 240 frames per second is in fact 320p. And the recording for 120 frames per second is 640p. So it is very, very low resolution. Obviously, I would mostly shoot this in 120 frames per second to get at least a little bit of quality back. Now, I was considering this camera as a potential possibility to replace the camera that I normally record with, my EOS Rebel T3i, that I have somewhat stolen from my parents. But I'm not really sure that I trust this because this camera is even slightly older than my EOS T3i. So I don't think that it would be able to record for very long before overheating. Regardless of that, however, this camera does do tracking autofocus while it's recording, which this one does not. It is completely stationary, has no active focusing whatsoever. So, I may or may not try and record one of my videos on this and see if there's only half a video because it overheated. Regardless though, this camera records for 30 minutes, but you can just press the record button again and it'll happily keep going. And it will never stop you from recording due to overheating. It will happily overheat, and it actually hasn't caused me any problems, so So, let's take a look at some photos, videos, and slow-mo from this camera. And finally, for those of you who have seen my community post, and who are sticking to the end of my videos, thank you, by the way. You're probably wondering about my little project that I teased. And let me just say, it's not ready. It might be ready next week, but I'm making no promises.